My family forgot I spoke 3 languages, including the one they were whispering in. I was sitting in my own living room, pretending to doze in my recliner, when I heard my daughter-in-law switch languages. That's when I knew something terrible was about to happen. My name is Rosa Delgado. I'm 78 years old, and my family had apparently forgotten that I grew up speaking 3 languages fluently: English, Spanish, and Portuguese. They forgot because I'm old now, and to them, old means stupid. Old means deaf. Old means irrelevant. They were very, very wrong. It started 3 months ago when my son Miguel and his wife Carla moved into my house. Just temporarily, they said. Just until they got back on their feet financially. Miguel had lost his job at the tech company. Something about layoffs. Restructuring. I didn't ask too many questions. He was my son. My only child. Of course I'd help him. They arrived with 3 suitcases and Carla's mother, Beatrice. Nobody had mentioned Beatrice was coming too. But there she was, a short woman with sharp eyes and an even sharper tongue, speaking rapid Portuguese to Carla as they walked through my front door like they owned the place. I greeted them warmly, made up the guest rooms, cooked a big meal to welcome them. I was happy to help my family. I lived alone in this 4-bedroom house since my husband Eduardo died 6 years ago. The company would be nice, I thought. How naive I was. The first week was fine. Everyone was polite, grateful, helpful. Miguel kissed my cheek every morning and thanked me for taking them in. Carla complimented my cooking. Even Beatrice smiled occasionally, though her smiles never reached her eyes. The second week, small things started to change. Carla began rearranging my kitchen without asking. When I objected, she said in English that it was more efficient her way, that I should trust her since she used to manage a restaurant. I let it go. Pick your battles, Rosa, I told myself. The third week, they started having conversations in Portuguese when I was in the room. Not occasionally, constantly. They'd switch languages mid-sentence whenever they didn't want me to understand something. I'd be sitting right there, and they'd look at me, switch to Portuguese, talk for 5 minutes, then switch back to English and smile at me like nothing had happened. They thought I couldn't understand, but I could understand every single word. My mother was from Brazil. She'd immigrated to California when she married my father, but she spoke only Portuguese to me until I was 5 years old. Then she taught me Spanish, because she said every educated person should speak at least 3 languages. My English came from school, from friends, from growing up American. But Portuguese was my first language. The language of lullabies and bedtime stories and my mother's voice. I'd just never mentioned it to Miguel's family. It had never come up. Eduardo and I spoke Spanish at home. Miguel grew up speaking Spanish and English. When he married Carla, a Brazilian woman, I was happy he'd found someone who shared part of his heritage. But we all communicated in English together, occasionally Spanish. There was never a reason to speak Portuguese. Until now. Until they needed a language they thought I couldn't understand. At first, the Portuguese conversations were mundane. Complaints about the house being old-fashioned. Comments about my cooking being too heavy. Beatrice saying I dressed like an old woman, which was particularly funny since she was only 3 years younger than me. I let it all slide. I smiled and pretended not to understand. I was curious where this would go. By the 4th week, the conversations got more interesting. I was in my recliner one evening, eyes closed, apparently napping. The TV was on low. They thought I was asleep. Carla said in Portuguese that they needed to speed things up. Miguel asked what she meant. She said they couldn't wait much longer, that her mother needed the money soon, that they had debts Beatrice had co-signed on, and the creditors were getting aggressive. Miguel asked how much more time she thought they needed. Carla said maybe 2 more months, maybe 3. They had to be careful, she said. They couldn't rush it, or I might get suspicious. My heart started beating faster, but I kept my breathing steady, kept my eyes closed. What were they planning? Beatrice said something about the house being worth at least $800,000 in this market, maybe more. The neighborhood had gotten very desirable. Miguel said his mother would never sell, that she loved this house, that it was where his father had died and she'd never leave. Carla laughed. A cold laugh. She said in Portuguese that it didn't matter what I wanted. Once they had me declared incompetent, they could sell it themselves. The money would go into a trust for my care, but they'd control the trust. They'd be the trustees. They could pay themselves management fees, caregiver fees, anything they wanted. I stopped breathing for a second, then forced myself to take a slow, normal breath, to keep pretending. Miguel was quiet for a long moment. Then he said he didn't know if he could do that to his mother. His voice sounded uncertain, guilty. Carla's voice turned sharp. She reminded him in Portuguese that they were about to lose everything. Her mother's house was in foreclosure. They had $60,000 in credit card debt. Miguel hadn't found a job in 3 months. What choice did they have? His mother was old, she said. She'd forget anyway. She probably wouldn't even know the difference between living here and living in a facility. Beatrice added that I was already showing signs of confusion. Just yesterday, I'd asked what day it was twice. I'd forgotten I'd already had lunch. These were clear signs of dementia, she said with authority, like she was a doctor instead of someone who'd worked in a hair salon for 40 years. I wanted to scream that I'd asked what day it was, because every day felt the same with them here. Not because I had dementia. I'd forgotten about lunch, because I'd skipped it to avoid another meal of their criticism disguised as concern. But I stayed silent, stayed still, kept listening. Miguel asked how they'd prove incompetence. Carla said it was easy. They'd been documenting everything for weeks. Every time I forgot something. Every time I moved slowly. Every time I needed help opening a jar or couldn't hear the TV. They had videos on their phones, she said. Notes. A journal of incidents. They'd already consulted with a lawyer. She continued in Portuguese. A friend of her mother's who specialized in elder law. He'd told them exactly what they needed to do. Get me to sign some papers. Get me to a doctor who'd testify I wasn't competent. File for conservatorship. It would take 6 months at most. And here was the clever part, Carla said, her voice excited now. They'd use my own money to pay for it all. The lawyer fees, the court costs, everything. It would all come out of my estate eventually. I'd be paying for my own imprisonment, she said, and then laughed at her own joke. Beatrice asked what they'd do with me after. Miguel said quietly that they'd find a good facility, somewhere clean and safe. Carla said they didn't need to spend too much on it. Just somewhere decent enough that it wouldn't raise questions. Most of the money from the house would go to paying off their debts, she said, to giving them a fresh start, to maybe buying a small place in Brazil where the cost of living was cheaper. They talked for another 20 minutes, working out details, making plans for my life like I was already gone, like I was already dead. When they finally went to bed, I sat in that recliner in the dark for 3 more hours, my mind racing. My son was planning to have me declared incompetent, to steal my house, to lock me away in some facility while they spent my money and lived their lives. Miguel, my baby boy, who I'd raised alone after Eduardo died, who I'd worked 3 jobs to put through college, who I'd helped with his first car, his wedding, the down payment on his first house before he lost it in the divorce from his first wife. That Miguel was going to betray me in the worst way possible. I didn't sleep that night. I lay in my bed, in the house Eduardo and I had bought 43 years ago. The house where we'd raised our son. The house where I'd nursed Eduardo through his final illness. And I made plans of my own. The next morning, I shuffled into the kitchen slowly, playing up my age. Let them think I was weak. Let them think I was confused. Let them document every slow movement, every forgotten word. Because I was documenting too. While they were at work, Miguel had finally found a part-time job, and Carla worked afternoons. I went through their rooms. I found the journal Carla kept. Pages and pages of notes about my supposed decline. Rosa forgot to turn off the stove. Rosa couldn't remember her neighbor's name. Rosa got confused about what year it is. All lies or exaggerations, written in Portuguese, like evidence for a trial. I photographed every page with my phone. The phone Miguel had given me last year, thinking I barely knew how to use it. I'd taken a class at the senior center on smartphone photography. I knew exactly what I was doing. I found printouts from the lawyer, a man named Davidson Chen. His instructions were detailed, methodical. Document everything. Get videos. Have witnesses. Isolate her from friends. Control her information. Make sure she doesn't consult her own lawyer. That last part made me angry. They'd been actively keeping me away from my attorney, Robert Kim, who'd handled Eduardo's estate. Every time I mentioned calling him about updating my will, Carla would distract me. Change the subject. Suggest we do it next week. Now I understood why. I called Robert from my bedroom with the door locked, told him everything. He was silent for a long moment, then said he'd seen cases like this before, more often than people realized. Adult children stealing from their parents, using the legal system as a weapon. He told me to keep gathering evidence, not to confront them yet. He'd prepared documents protecting my assets, revoking any powers they might claim. He'd also connect me with a geriatric psychiatrist who could evaluate me, prove I was completely competent. Most importantly, he said, I needed to be careful. People who were desperate and cornered could be dangerous. That scared me more than I wanted to admit. Was my own son dangerous? Would he hurt me to get what he wanted? I didn't know anymore. The Miguel I'd raised wouldn't have done any of this. But this new Miguel, the one who whispered with his wife in Portuguese about stealing my home, was a stranger to me. Over the next 3 weeks, I played my part perfectly. I shuffled more, forgot more things on purpose, asked the same questions twice. Let them help me with tasks I could easily do myself. And I listened. Every night, they'd wait until they thought I was asleep, then talk in Portuguese about their plans. The conversations got more detailed, more specific, more cruel. Beatrice suggested they could speed things up by giving me sleeping pills in my evening tea, making me drowsy and confused during the day. Carla thought that was brilliant. Miguel hesitated but didn't say no. That's when I knew I had to act. I'd gathered enough evidence. Photos of the journal, recordings on my phone of their Portuguese conversations. They never suspected the old woman dozing in her chair had turned on a voice recorder app. Documents from their lawyer. Bank statements I'd found showing their debts. Robert filed emergency motions. Got a restraining order hearing scheduled. Arranged for the psychiatrist to evaluate me. The day before the hearing, I made my move. I had invited my neighbor Carol over for coffee, loudly enough for Carla to hear. When Carla suggested maybe I was too tired for visitors, I insisted. Made a fuss about it. Acted confused about why Carla didn't want me seeing my friend. While Carol was there, I casually mentioned in front of everyone that I'd be going downtown tomorrow for some errands. Miguel asked what errands. I said vaguely that I had an appointment. Couldn't quite remember what for. Maybe at the bank or the doctor. I saw Carla and Miguel exchange looks. They thought I was getting worse. They thought their plan was working. The next morning, I left at 9 o'clock, dressed in my best suit, the navy blue one I'd bought for Eduardo's funeral. Miguel offered to drive me, but I insisted on calling an Uber. Told him I needed to feel independent. He seemed relieved, probably thinking I'd get lost or confused downtown, giving them more evidence of my incompetence. Instead, I went to court. Robert met me there with the psychiatrist, Dr. Ellen Morrison, who'd evaluated me the day before. Her report was clear. I was cognitively intact, emotionally stable, and fully competent to manage my affairs. In fact, she noted, my memory and reasoning skills were above average for my age. The judge reviewed all the evidence I'd brought. The journal, the recordings, the lawyer's instructions, the documented lies about my mental state. He was not happy. His face got red as he read through everything. When he asked if the respondents, Miguel, Carla, and Beatrice, were present, Robert said they'd been served but had chosen not to appear. They didn't know what the hearing was about, you see. They thought I was downtown confused and wondering, not filing legal actions against them. The judge granted everything I asked for. A restraining order against all three of them. An emergency injunction preventing them from filing for conservatorship. Protection of all my assets. And he referred the matter to the district attorney for possible elder abuse charges. He also gave me a police escort home to remove them from my property. I'll never forget the looks on their faces when I walked through my front door at 2 o'clock that afternoon with 2 police officers behind me. Miguel went pale. Carla's mouth fell open. Beatrice started yelling in Portuguese. Angry words, accusations, calling me a liar and a manipulator. That's when I responded to her. In perfect, fluent Portuguese. I told her I'd understood every word they'd said for the past 3 months, every plan, every cruel comment, every calculated move to steal my life. The color drained from Carla's face. Miguel actually stumbled backward, like I'd struck him. I continued in Portuguese, my voice steady and cold. I told them they had 1 hour to pack their belongings and leave. The restraining order meant they couldn't come within 500 feet of me or my property. If they violated it, they'd be arrested. Beatrice started crying, switching to English now, saying it was all a misunderstanding. We were family. How could I do this to family? I switched to English too. Told her that family doesn't steal. Family doesn't lie. Family doesn't plot to lock away their mother in a facility while spending her money. Miguel tried to approach me. One of the officers stepped between us. Miguel's eyes were red. He said he was sorry, that they were desperate. that Carla had pressured him, that he never really would have gone through with it. I asked him which part he wouldn't have gone through with. The part where he documented my supposed incompetence. The part where he consulted with a lawyer about stealing my house. The part where he discussed giving me sleeping pills without my knowledge. He had no answer. They packed in silence. Miguel cried the whole time. Carla was angry, muttering in Portuguese, forgetting again that I could understand, about how ungrateful I was, how they'd only been trying to help, how I'd regret this. Beatrice loaded their car with shaking hands, shooting me looks of pure hatred. When they were done, when the suitcases were loaded and they were standing by their car, Miguel turned to me one last time. Asked if there was any way to fix this. Any way I could forgive him. I told him the truth. That I didn't know. That he'd broken something in me that might never heal. That he'd looked at his mother and seen only money. Only an obstacle. Only someone to use. I told him I'd spent 3 months listening to him plot against me in a language he thought I couldn't understand. 3 months knowing my own son wished I was senile. Wished I was helpless, wished I was out of the way. I told him that hurt worse than anything Eduardo's death had hurt. Because Eduardo didn't choose to leave me. Miguel had chosen to betray me. He got in the car, without another word. They drove away. I stood in my driveway, watching them disappear, with 2 police officers beside me, making sure they really left. When their car turned the corner and vanished from sight, my legs gave out. One of the officers, a young woman named Santos, caught me and helped me inside. She made me tea, sat with me while I cried, told me she'd seen cases like this before, that I'd done the right thing, that I was brave. I didn't feel brave. I felt destroyed. That was 6 months ago. The district attorney did press charges. Miguel and Carla pled guilty to attempted elder fraud. They got probation and were ordered to pay restitution for the legal fees they'd cost me. Beatrice wasn't charged. She'd been involved in planning, but hadn't actually done anything criminal. They moved to Arizona, I heard. Started over somewhere cheaper. Miguel sends letters sometimes. Apologies. Explanations. Excuses. I don't open them anymore. I've sold the house. Too many bad memories now. Too many ghosts of conversations whispered in Portuguese while they thought I was sleeping. I bought a smaller place near the senior center where I volunteer teaching ESL classes. English, Spanish, and Portuguese. The irony isn't lost on me. I've also started a support group for victims of elder abuse. We meet twice a month. The stories are heartbreaking. Adult children stealing, grandchildren manipulating, neighbors taking advantage. Nobody thinks it will happen to them until it does. I tell them my story, about how being underestimated saved me, about how pretending to be less than I was gave me time to protect myself, about how speaking 3 languages meant I heard the truth when they thought I couldn't. Some people ask if I regret pressing charges, if I wish I'd handled it differently, if I miss my son. The answer is complicated. Do I miss the Miguel I thought I had? The son I raised? Yes. Every single day. Do I miss the Miguel who actually existed? The one who plotted to steal my home and lock me away? No. That man was a stranger. Would I do it again? Would I press charges, get the restraining order, force him out of my life? Yes. Without hesitation. Because the alternative was letting him succeed. The alternative was letting him steal my freedom, my home, my dignity, my entire life. I'm 78 years old. I speak 3 languages fluently. I'm sharper than most people half my age. And I will not be anyone's victim, not even my own son's. My name is Rosa Delgado, and I survived my family's betrayal because they forgot one simple thing. I understood every word. If you're experiencing something similar, please get help. Talk to a lawyer. Document everything. Don't wait until it's too late. And remember, you're stronger than they think you are. What would you do in my situation? Share your thoughts below.